Well, leaving money to a child who struggles financially can be nerve-wracking, right? It doesn't matter what the issues they have are. There are ways to leave an inheritance without handing over a lump sum. And this video is really going to share some of those strategies, talk about some smart ways and some smart options for you to make sure that you take care of your child, things you can trust in case you are worried about that future. Welcome into Complete Estate Planning. I'm Ben George with Nick Rosenbauer of the Rosenbauer Law Office there right outside of Cincinnati, serving all of Ohio, and you can find them online, CincinnatiEstatePlan.com. Nick, welcome in. How are you today?
Doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. Also, I know you just had a nice round of golf. Well, 9 holes, but it's like a mixture of frustration, but also feeling pretty good about where you are.
Yeah, had a good round. But there's always a couple bad shots out there.
Yeah.
It's one of those. It's one of those shoulda, woulda, couldas. And I guess that's the joy and the frustration of the game. It's one of those you can always do better. There's no perfection, at least for us. Recreational hacks like myself. I'm still trying to teach my son that and his little kiddie golf season just ended a couple weeks ago, and his team ended up in first place in the regional, league, if you will, all the local courses around here. But it doesn't matter. He'll tell you every bad shot he ever hit, or every drive that didn't go well, even in the little 2-man scrambles, where like he would get pissed when he hit a bad shot, but his partner would hit a great shot and they were in good shape, but he'd be, just really, he's a real calm, happy, serene, easygoing kid, but if he hits a bad golf shot, it's not pretty. He has expectations that may exceed his ability. That's maybe a nice way to put it. And I told him, I said, "Hey, buddy, you're going to have to deal with that forever." I said, "Daddy's old. Daddy's 30 years older than you are, and Daddy hits bad shots all the time." And of course, his response to that was, he said, "Well, you're really old, and I'm really good. I shouldn't hit bad shots."
Humbled.
Yeah, he's not humble when it comes to golf. And then the best thing is, like, when we'll just play by ourselves, I ask him what his score is, and he only counts his number of putts. So he gets like a 1, 2, or a 3 on every hole. So you'd be, when he gets a 1 on a par 5, and he's breaking 25 for 9 holes all the time. So
yeah. I love it. That's awesome.
Who knows? We'll look back on this video like 20 years from now, and he'll be like on the Corn Ferry Tour or something, or you'll pull this up 15 years from now, and he's getting like a full ride, to play in college. In which case, all of the "I told you so's" you can certainly come back and wave your finger at me if he gets a full ride, or ends up playing professional. For now, I'm not gonna be that guy who assumes that my kids are going to go professional in 7 different sports. Until I'm proved wrong, I'm not going to hold my breath. But if that happens, you can come back and wag your finger at me. So.
We'll just show them how you help teach them the game and the lessons that were so important to help instill the right attitude out there on the course. So I'll come back to you. All right.
Oh, goodness.
Well, we're talking children today. A little bit of a different angle on it, though. Talking about if you are a parent that you have a child that maybe isn't great with their finances, right? There's a lot of reasons for this, but it does cause some concerns as you're setting up your estate and Oh man, what do I do if I leave all this money and they're bad with money? I don't want to ruin it all or throw it all away or waste it all. So, how do you handle it? That's what we're talking about today. Again, if you want to schedule a call with Nick, go to completeestateplanning.com. You'll find the link right there to schedule a call and talk through it. But, Nick, this is an important topic because, look, kids are bad with money. We know that. Some are worse than others, some are responsible. But we're talking about those that aren't, those that do struggle with it. So, just kind of to set this up, what are some of those situations that you see typically, and who are we talking about here? When we talk about, okay, they're bad with money, what exactly does that mean? What are the situations where you might want to limit that access to an inheritance?
Right. And there's a number of reasons we could be, we could be at this point, and not all of them. So not all of them are necessarily, like an insult on someone's character per se. Now, obviously, what everyone remembers is the guy who got a bunch of money and blew it all on, cars and, went to the casino and partying and was bankrupt in a year, or drugs or something. So obviously everyone's like, that guy is, a fool, is an idiot, is irresponsible. Now that's part of it. Don't get me wrong, but there are a number of other scenarios that are frankly a lot more common than, I have a deadbeat who's just going to party and drink and gamble it away, where we really need to be careful about this. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, an attack on their character. So I would say age is a big one. My kids are 3 and 6. They don't know how to manage money. And that has nothing to do with, an insult on them. It's just 3 and 6-year-olds don't know how to manage money. Legally, they can't own money. So a lot of times I'm talking to people and it's, we don't have to go beyond how old are the kids? And then, is that old enough to be able to responsibly manage a large sum of money after mom and dad pass away? So that alone can handle that and make it to where you would need, to have some guardrails in place. And then even if they are of age, so to speak, you can still look at something where there is, immaturity. You could have someone who's immature, but Ben, that can be at any age. Mm-hmm. You can have a responsible 20-year-old and an irresponsible 80-year-old. So obviously those are kind of the two things that people think about most often. And then also you'll have, even if they're of age and reasonably have a good head on their shoulders, sometimes it's just a money specific thing. I've had a lot of people say, hey, they work hard, they take care of their family, they did okay in school, but they're just not good with money. Either they blow money, they're materialistic, they have spending problems, or the other side where they say they have no experience and they wouldn't spend any money. They would hide it under the mattress. They wouldn't invest it. They just, and I've heard people say they wouldn't know what to do with that. Even if it's not something where they're, on their third bankruptcy, they say they've never had anything like that. They don't know how to invest or deal with taxes or deal with that a level of money. So just kind of the inexperience alone can be something where, hey, dumping a lot of money in this person's lap after mom and dad passes away, and all of a sudden that's when you're getting their inheritance and they have no help, no one to turn to. It could be a lot and it could be quite the burden on them. And then obviously, Ben, you have the situation where you have someone who, has a gambling problem, a drinking problem, a substance problem, a spending problem. Well, they'll just blow the money and waste all of it. That's probably what people think of, when they read the title of this episode. And then also another one that I actually, people don't think about out loud, but I have a lot of private conversations with clients is they say, I love my daughter. I don't love the guy she married. He's kind of a bum. He's mean to her. He doesn't work very hard. He's manipulative. And I just know that if something happens, I'm worried that he's going to take the money. So like an in-law basically getting the money that you leave for your child. So that's another one that, again, people maybe don't say out loud, but between you and me, Ben, I have a lot of private conversations with clients who say, they're worried about the money going to an in-law or outside of the family. And then, their own child or grandchild not being the one to choose what happens with the money. Um, and all of these, Ben, are not scenarios where someone says, I want to disown them. I want to disinherit them. I want to cut them out. That's not what I'm talking about here. Because if you write them out and say, I'm not leaving them any money, then we don't have any of these problems, right? Because there's nothing that we're leaving them. I'm talking about situations where we want to leave them money, but I'm really worried about what happens to it if I dump it in their lap. Okay. So, what we'll talk about here in a minute is how to financially support or how to leave an inheritance to someone, with guardrails, with training wheels, without just dumping it in their lap, with a support system, with a plan, with a recipe. So it's there. We're not cutting them off, but at the same time, Ben, we're not, being sloppy or irresponsible. We're not just like dumping everything in their lap. Okay, so there's a balance, but that's what we're trying to figure out, and we'll talk about a couple options here in a minute.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? That's why you sit down with an estate planning attorney and work through this, and that's what we want to do today. So let's talk about some of those ways that you can provide that support, Nick, without giving out that full control of the money.
Yeah, absolutely. So so we're looking for a way to have your cake and eat it too. Now, the first things that you want to do in almost every instance, you're going to be setting up some sort of a trust. Okay, so you're going to be using a trust so we can leave money to someone, or we can earmark it for someone without, like a will or probate or a beneficiary, where once we get through all the paperwork, it just goes to them all at one time, and we're not mailing them a check. So the trust would allow the money to be for them. So I'm leaving an inheritance for this child or grandchild or whomever, but I am putting rules, I'm putting guardrails, I'm putting restrictions, or, maybe just like a structure or a playbook for it. So I can, set it up for, to take care of them, but, prevent waste or abuse or blowing all of the money. And then also just set them up for success, because I think it's not, I think it's pretty harsh to look at these people and, Ben, do you blame the 19-year-old kid who just lost both of his parents when he doesn't know what to do with the $300,000 he gets? Are we really blaming him like he was supposed to have that all figured out when he was just about to go away for freshman year in college? I think a lot of these people, just by saying, here you go, I almost blame the clients. I almost blame the parents. I think you're setting people up for failure. Like, I think you're putting something in motion that has a very high likelihood of getting screwed up. So instead, I think you're looking at setting up some sort of a trust. Number of ways to structure it, which we'll go through a couple options here in a minute. And then another piece of that, you will not only want to set up a trust, that'll be the vehicle that makes the most sense here in most instances. You will need to pick another person or a institution. You'll need a third party to be the trustee. Okay, you're going to want someone managing the money on their behalf. Okay, you don't want the child or the grandchild managing their own money, because then all the protections or being able to help them out, the training wheels, the guardrails, what have you, all of that goes out the window. Okay, Ben, if I say, here's the rules, but hey, 19-year-old son, you are the gatekeeper for your own money. I've had people do that. I have seen things where, plan comes from someone else and they say, I don't want my kids getting the money till they're 25. If they're under 25, it's only for emergencies. And their 19-year-old kid is the trustee. They're the gatekeeper. What are you doing? Like, it makes no sense. Why are you making the 19-year-old, part of his job is to keep his money away from himself? Until he gets older. But you see people do this sort of thing all the time. So yeah, you're really wanting to set up a trust, and you're wanting another person or a bank or trust company or another institution to be in charge of managing it, so you can have, a third party be in control of it. And again, we'll go over here in a second, Ben, a number of the different ways you can set it up, but that's basically where all of this starts, and then the rest of this is just details on how you want to write the script.
Okay, very good. So again, make note of that as well. But there are, again, some options on how you distribute this. So kind of take us through, typically what you lay out, what somebody can choose from, but then also, which of these is probably most common, the way that people handle this.
Yeah, so common. I want to be careful about common, or just because I see a lot of people doing this doesn't mean that, at least I tell people that just because other people do this doesn't mean that's right for your family. But more of to give you a number of ideas and some things that work for a lot of people. A big thing that we will do is we will put an age range, or what I call a finish line on it. So you will say something, and it can be one or it can be multiple. So I've had things where someone will say, for example, hey, the money's there for emergencies only. And once you hit age 25, then you can have all of your money. And then maybe by 25, you're a little more responsible than you were at 18. Or you get half of it at 25 and the other half of it at 30. Okay, so I've seen, multiple tiers based on an older age. Okay, so I'll see these when there's not any concerns like disability or substance problem. It's just hey, they're not old enough to manage it. And then we'll put a more responsible age or a couple ages as a finish line. I've also seen things where people will tie it to a certain milestone, such as when they graduate from high school or graduate from college, or, are fully employed, something like that. So it gives people the time to grow up, naturally, and the way that you normally would, instead of just hoping and praying that the 19-year-old will grow up right away after his parents are gone and then have the maturity of a 29-year-old. I think that's risky to do, and you're setting them up for failure. So you could do that where there's like an age finish line. I've also seen things where people will have, they want more active, more ongoing support, or financial, kind of, benefits coming to them more regularly, but not the whole item. So I've had people say, give them a certain amount of money per year. So it's like a slow drip instead of just dumping everything in their lap. So maybe so many $1,000s per year. So it helps them kind of get used to this idea of handling money, of budgeting, but not letting them waste all of it, right? So it's kind of a dip your toe in a little bit at a time. I've also seen people do this just as like a monthly thing, where it almost acts as like a paycheck or an annuity. And then, instead of saying, here's 500,000, here's 5,000 a month. 5,000 a month, is it going to get you a penthouse in New York City? No, but you won't starve. You won't be homeless. You'll be able to take care of things. And it allows you to start small and figure out a budget and how to deal with things. And at $5,000 a month, you can't blow the whole thing up all at once. And you can't go buy a Ferrari and a $5 million home and be bankrupt right away. So it's kind of a way to gradually ease these people into adulthood and budgeting and managing finances like an adult, and learning how to deal with money or an inheritance. And sometimes these things will go on for a while and then end when they're older. I've had some people say, hey, they're 41 years old. They don't get it. I don't think they're ever going to get it. I've had people, do this where this is just a lifelong thing, where I'm never dumping money in your lap, but I'm having a safety net for you for the rest of your life. So that's an option. I've had other things where people just leave it up to someone that they trust. And it is as simple as, the money is for little Johnny, and my trustee is Susie, and it's up to her. Whatever she's allowed to release money for little Johnny for whatever reason she thinks is necessary at any point. And you are just basically leaving it up to another person. Like their full discretion. It's called like a wholly discretionary trust. This is something that is very, you don't have to predict a whole lot, because you can just say, well, whatever the trustee thinks is necessary at the time, they can do. But obviously, this is placing a lot of trust in someone else, and a lot of responsibility on someone else. So I will say, Ben, you have an easy button here if you have that person that you fully, confidently trust their judgment on anything. Okay, this is the person who has an extra set of keys to your house, already knows the alarm code. And Ben, a lot of people will say that, hey, my sister or my brother or my in-law or my cousin, I trust them fully. Can I just let them decide when my kids are ready for the money? If you have someone that you have that level of trust in, you can kind of pass the buck on to them. But of course, people need to understand, how much power you're giving to that person, and you need to be solid. You need to fully trust them. Okay. So that's another. I would say those are the most common things that I've seen. They don't obviously apply to everything, but like an age or a couple ages as far as the finish line, or like an ongoing annual or monthly allowance. Those are probably the second most common. And then if you have a situation like I did there, where it's just, hey, whatever my cousin Susie thinks, whenever she thinks they are ready to get the money, it is up to them. I would say those are probably the three. And again, you can obviously play with each of those, Ben, but I would say those are the three common, probably foundations, if you will, that we kind of build things on.
Great. Yeah, thanks for taking us through each of those. I mean, I think that's pretty well explained. And if you have any further questions, please reach out about how to approach that. But are there any extra considerations just in terms of like protections that you might want to think about in this process?
Yeah, and again, these are kind of, circumstance specific, but if you have someone who is handicapped or disabled and maybe on, disability benefits, we've talked about, special needs trusts in the past that have those special protections. There are trusts to help out if we're worried about a crummy marriage and your child getting divorced, to keep it a segregated, separate property. They have what's known as spendthrift trusts. Most states have a spendthrift clause that will allow extra protection of an inheritance from creditors. So if someone's declared bankruptcy, if they have a lot of debt, that sort of thing. And again, every state is different on how good those protections are. So you make sure you want to talk to a specialist about all of that. Or you can have things I've done, incentives, where they will, match an income. Or, once you get through school, you get more money. Or once you get a job, you get more money. Or if if you have a substance problem, if you are sober or clean. So there's ways you can put incentives in there as well. And again, all of that's obviously circumstance specific, Ben. But if you have like a certain concern like that, where they're, like disabled, or there's like creditors, or, they're in debt or bankruptcies, they're worried about a crummy marriage, there are specific protections that may be available to you based on the situation and the state that you're dealing with. So again, make sure you talk to a specialist who knows all of the tools in the toolbox. And Ben, these can be uncomfortable conversations too. Okay, so you're going to have that conversation where the lawyer says, "Tell me what's going on with your son." Okay, so you're going to have to. I'm not saying it's a lot of fun, and I'm sure you don't like rehashing it, but this is something where you need to be open and honest about what's going on. So someone like me has the ability to say, "Hey, now I know everything we need to watch out for. This is the best way to do it." Okay. So again, just give as much detail as you can to your attorney. And then, make sure that, they know all of the everything we need to watch out, so they can help go over the right tools for the project.
Well, we've talked a lot about, what to do, why you do it, but what is the risk of actually not doing anything about this, Nick?
Well, obviously, the alternative is just dumping all the money in their lap, right? And obviously, one of three things is going to happen. They're going to spend it all. They're going to hide it all under the mattress, or, they'll get taken advantage of. You have some people who they're really, really nice, and all of a sudden, Ben, everyone finds out you got a bunch of money, and all of a sudden, everyone's your best friend. Ben, I'll fly out to you and say, hey, man, I'm falling on some hard times. Can you, we've been best friends for a long time. Surely you can spare $1 million for me, or something like that. So yeah, none of those are good. If we're in a circumstance where we're considering this. So obviously, Ben, you need to be careful, make sure you understand what's going on. And then, Ben, basically what you're doing is you're closing your eyes and saying, if I'm not around physically, how would I want someone to financially take care of and raise my kids in my absence? So how can I recreate what I would do if I was still here? So if someone can answer that one question, that usually gets us where we need to go. Okay, so that pretty much covers it. And then kind of the last thing I would say, once you know what's going on, make sure you pick the right trustee. We understand how much responsibility they will have and how much trust you need to put in them. If things change, obviously make sure that you keep on top of things and are, having regular reviews and updates, because someone who doesn't have their act together at 19 might really have their act together by the time they're 25, right? I did a lot of growing up between 19 and 25. I don't know about you, Ben, but I was a totally different person, And then there is obviously, I'd say the last thing about this, and again, Ben, this is really where you want to make sure you're working with an expert who does this all the time, the balance between structure and flexibility. Okay. So there's obviously rules we need to put in place. We need to be careful. We need to be safe. But the other side of that is there's a lot of unknowns in the future, and you don't want to handcuff the family or handcuff the trustee 20 years down the road after you're gone with a circumstance or a need or a situation that we could not have predicted ahead of time. Okay, so there's a balance to structure and guardrails, but also flexibility. And again, a lot of that goes to how careful we need to be and who we are trusting to take care of things for us. So I'd say those are the things that if we're going to do this, if we get those right, then I think we have a pretty good likelihood of success.
Great. Well, great breakdown, Nick. And if you're in the situation where, hey, even if you don't quite sure how you want to handle it, at least begin discussing some of those options, what it might look like and what might fit you best. Again, Nick is an estate planning attorney, so he's gone through these situations with many people and can help walk you through it. So even if you aren't quite sure what you want to do right now, again, have that meeting, begin talking about it, and making sure that you have that confidence for the future of not only your assets, but your children as well. It's so important for so many of us. So close it out on that note. Nick, thanks again for the time, the insight as always, and encourage anybody that has any questions to reach out, but also subscribe to the channel as well. We talk about more and more estate planning topics and issues, so we'll have more stuff coming. Appreciate it, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, keep sending all those mailbag questions and all those comments our way. We read as many of them as we can, and it gives us some good ideas. Obviously when we're answering the mailbag questions. So shout out to all of our listeners who are leaving us a review, making comments, and leaving questions. Love it. Love to hear from all of our viewers and listeners. So keep it coming.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by estate planning? The process can seem complex, but it doesn't have to be. The Rosenbauer Law Office is dedicated to helping you protect what matters most: your family, your assets, and your peace of mind. Nick and the team will guide you through every step of the process, making sure you feel confident and informed along the way. Take the first step toward peace of mind today. Schedule an introductory call by clicking the link in the description of today's show.
This show is for informational purposes only and does not provide any legal advice. Information on this show may not constitute the most up-to-date legal information. Please do not act or refrain from acting based solely on anything you hear on this show. This show does not form any attorney-client relationship with the Rosenbauer Law Office, LLC. Please seek the counsel of a qualified attorney before addressing your own estate planning needs.